2020 honors the centennial, the 100 years of women having the vote, of the enfranchisement in the United States. And this class is more important now in 2020 as it's ever been. And as we look at the history and the struggle and the power and the narratives and the hopes of centuries of women aspiring for a better world, we'll bring those tools of the past. We'll look around at where those tools and what new tools are being developed, because we need all hands on deck as we move into this next election cycle and as we continue to interrogate what does it mean to be a woman? What are the many ways it means to be a woman in this world? What are the many ways it means to be a person? What are the responsibilities? What are the ethical prerogatives? And how can we move that needle a little bit further as we continue down this road towards justice? I'm Dr. Bajkowski. I am the Anisfield Wolf Sages Fellow here in the English department. That means I teach courses aimed at highlighting social justice issues that encourage and form kinship groups across a wide diversity of identities. This course offers up a variety of texts that we're going to look at very closely. We're going to read a lot of bell hooks and her book, Feminism is for Everybody. And there's a real emphasis there, not just on everybody, but on everybody. We will be reading texts by intersex writers. We'll be reading texts by transgender writers. We'll be looking at, in close detail, the various articles, essays, and stories and poems that come together to form this bridge called My Back. And we'll look at some other texts from the feminist canon, including The Feminine Mystique, The Second Sex, the works of Audre Lorde, and more. Our first section begins with the concept of toxic and toxicity. We're going to look at what defines a toxic masculinity versus a non-toxic masculinity, what defines a toxic femininity and a non-toxic femininity, and how those work together to create senses of shame. In our second section, we look at life and choice and all the different meanings, politics, and ethics that surrounds those two words. In particular, we're going to look at life and choice as they relate to being a wife, being an independent woman, being a mother, being a daughter, having the expectations of one day reproducing. Our third section will unpack the Me Too movement, both in its most modern formation as a hashtag and a collection of testimonies on places like Twitter and other areas of social media. We'll look at particular stories that have broken and laid bare systems of abuse that exist in our entertainment industry, in our businesses and academies, in families, and how these stories have been silenced over generations. Our fourth section takes its name from the Women's March. In this section, we'll examine the current politics and histories of protesting and marches. We'll look at the Black Lives Matter movement. We'll look at the Women's March in particular in its various avenues and arenas. We'll look at the protests going on in places like Pakistan and the Middle East. And we'll examine what these voices are trying to lift up. What are the stories, the identities, the violences that are not being heard and not being addressed by society? Our final section is called Sisterhood. Here we'll look at the communities and the identities and the affinities groups that use the concept of sisterhood, of femininity, of shared gender identities, and how those relationships can cement and bring about solidarity, can unify a movement, can create communities that share a common culture, and also have at different times and places been used to exclude people and reify marginalized differences and subordinations. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. I'm looking forward to hearing your readings and your analysis of these various texts. And I'm grateful that I get to go along with you on this journey.